We are picking up on Ches Amud Aleph. There's a new Mishnah here. Okay, we got Mishnahs today about Zav and Zava and Shemer, maybe against Shemer Yom Keneged Yom. It's like get through this, and then tomorrow, and then I think we start getting into Agada to Gemaras for like the next couple of weeks. So the Mishnah says at the beginning at the top of Ches Amud Aleph, Ein bein hamoder hana mechaver lamoder mimenu maichal el adrisas haregel v'kelim she'ein osim behem ochel nefesh. A person has the ability to forbid someone from getting any hana from him. He's not able to get any pleasure from him. I have the ability to say that you cannot have any pleasure from me at all. Okay, I have the ability to say that, just like you could say that that I'm not going to get any pleasure at all from this table. You know, so too, I can say that someone is not able to get any pleasure from me at all. And there's two types of ways that he could stop from having pleasure. One is he says that you cannot have any pleasure from me, period. Or there's such a thing that says that in terms of any food-related items, they're not going to have any pleasure from me at all. So the Mishnah says that, and so the Mishnah says that there's no difference between saying that you can't have any pleasure at all, and you cannot have any pleasure from me for food-related items, except for two things, and that are drisas haregel, which is the ability for someone to like take a shortcut through your property. So, and the Gemara is going to talk about that. So that it doesn't cost you anything for me to, for a person to cut through his property, and by this, and also for if you have kalim that you don't make food related items with it, for let's say like a hammer. So if someone says that you can't have any pleasure from me at all, then you're not able to cut through his. You can't cut through his yard, or you can't borrow his hammer from him because that's completely forbidden. If a person says that you can't have any pleasure from me except for food related items, we say that everything is a food related item, because if I don't end up doing something and you end up having to spend less on that item because I helped you out with it, then you can use that money to go buy food. So there's two things that don't come into play: a shortcut, taking a shortcut through someone's property, or like again, if you borrow a hammer, which is not normally rented, then that's the difference between the two. So Gemara says, except the Mishnah is saying that when it comes to, let's say, borrowing pots and pans, which are food-related items, they're equated, that whether you say that you can't have any pleasure at all or you can't have any pleasure from any food-related items, they're going to be equal to the same thing. So Gemara says, Drisa Sarego, what does that mean? Halokapti Yinchi, but people don't care if people are cutting through the yard. So why is it that if someone says you can't have any pleasure from me at all, then the person can't even cut through his yard? People are not makbid on that at all. That's not even considered to be like pleasure. It's like, it's almost like it's negligible. It's nothing. So my answer is Amarava Hamani Rebbe Lazar. It says Damar Vitor Asr B'Moder Hana. There's something called Vitor. Vitor is where someone is you're mevater on something, where it's like you're not makbid on it. You don't care about it. So there's a machlokas whether or not. So vitor was typically something that when they would have food merchants that would sell something. So let's say they would buy a pound of grain, they would throw on a little bit extra on the top just to make sure that they're not ripping off their customers. So that was considered to be like vitor, that they would say, it's so negligible what I'm putting on the top of your food items that I'm a vatir. I don't really care about it at all. So we're talking about Rebbe Lazar, who says that vitor is asur if someone says that they're not going to have hana, and that's why you're not able to cut through his property, because he holds that vitor is asur. You're not able to do that. Next Mishnah says, Ein ben nedarim l'nedavos elashan nedarim chay b'achriyusan u'nedavos enu chay b'achriyusan. There's no difference between a neder and a nedava. A neder is where someone says, I take a vow that I'm going to do something, and a dava is where someone takes a vow and he says, I'm going to give a present of something. So the Mishnah says that there's no difference between a neder and a nedava, except that for a neder you are obligated. If typically, again, the Gemara is going to talk about it. If someone says that I make a vow that I'm going to bring an animal for a karban in the Beis HaMikdash. So if something happens to that animal, I still have an obligation to bring an animal to as a karban to the Beis HaMikdash. Again, he owns one sheep, and he says, I pledge that I'm gonna donate a sheep. I'm gonna donate a sheep to the Beis HaMikdash. If the sheep dies, the owner still has to find out. He has to get another sheep from somewhere because he has an obligation on himself to bring the sheep. As opposed to if, let's say, he says, I promise I'm going to give this sheep. Okay, he says it's a nedava it's a neder. He says, I promise that I'm going to give vice versa. It's a nedava. He says, I promise I'm going to give this sheep as a carbon to the Beis Hamikdash, and then something happens to this sheep, so he no longer has an obligation to do it. So the Mishnah is saying that the only difference between them is whether or not you're obligated. The only difference between a neder and a nedava is whether or not you're obligated to make good if something happens to the thing that you pledged on. So Gemara says, but when it comes to delaying giving your vow, the Torah says you're not allowed to delay fulfilling your pledge. So when it comes to being Baal Ta'achar, whether someone says a neder or a nedava, so those are equated that you are not able to delay in giving that. And the Gemara says somewhere else that basically the Baal Ta'achar means if someone pledges he's going to do something, you have 3 Yom Tovim, 3 Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos to be able to fulfill your neder. Okay, so Gemara says, so Tanan Hasan we learned over there in the Mishnah in Kinim. Ezu's neder, what is considered to be a neder? Ha'omer harei alai olah. If someone says it is on me incumbent to bring an olah, and ezu nedava ha'omer harei zu olah. If someone says that this is an olah. So ma bein nedarim and nedava, what's the difference between them? Nedarim meso nignavu o avdu chai b'achriyusin. And when you have a neder, where someone said that it's on me to do it, so if something happens to the animal, you're still obligated to go find another animal and bring that animal as an olah. And the davos meso nignevo avdu enu chai b'achriyusin. But if you're giving a gift, if it's in a dava, you say that I'm going to give, where you say I'm going to give this animal to the Beis Hamikdash, then if something happens to that animal, you are no longer obligated to bring another one to take its place. Minani milim. Where do we know that there's a difference between whether or not someone has to bring a particular animal, whether it's a neder or a nedava? It says the Tan Rabbanon, "B'nir tzilo l'chaper alav," that it says in the pasuk that it should be accepted for him to forgive for him. So Rabbi Shimon Omer, as she'alav, that alav means it's on him. So that which is on him, chayav b'achriyuso. Then he's chayav, he's responsible if something happens to it. If someone says that it's on me to bring an animal to the Beis Hamikdash, then that's on the person himself. Whether or not something happens to the object, the person is still obligated to bring the animal. But again, if it's not on him, then he's not responsible to bring it. My mashma, so what does that mean? I'm Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avidimi, kivan de amar alai, command tain akasve dami. That once he says that it's on me to bring it, it's like it's resting on his shoulders. And then whatever happens, so if something happens to it, he's always going to be obligated to go back and to make sure that he takes care of it to fulfill what his pledge was going to be. All right, next Mishnah. So we're talking about zav now. We're going to talk about a zav. So a zav is someone that has a non-seminal emission. Okay, so it means he has an emission of some sort that is non-seminal, and the halacha is that if he has 1 or 2 in any 2 days to get straight, meaning like on Sunday and Monday, or if he has 3, which he would have it either like 3 on Sunday or 3 on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Again, it has to be combined. So then he becomes a zav, and what that means is that he then has to count 7 days after he has these emissions, and then he's able to, and then he's going to be tahar. So ein bein zav haroa shtei rio, so roa shalosh. There's no difference if someone had 2 of these emissions, or if he had 3 ela carbon. The only difference is that if someone had 2, then he saw, let's say, for 2 days, so he counts 7 days after that. He goes to the mikvah. He's tahar. There's nothing else he needs to do. If he had 3, then let's say again it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. He counts 7 days after that. He goes to the mikvah. He also has to bring a carbon before he's going to be tahar. So that's the difference. The difference between 2 and 3 is that whether or not he's going to bring a carbon.
What type of carbon?
Of an animal. What?
Is there like a specific type?
I don't know. But yeah, he has to bring a carbon. So the Gemara says, "Halein mishkav umoshav usfira shiva zev zashavim." But when it comes to there's a specific tuma of mishkav umoshav, which is only that you only have by a zav, and we're going to talk later by nida. The tuma of mishkav umoshav is very unique. That if Rashi says that if let's say someone was sitting on you have 10 mattresses that are piled up on top of each other, and the zav sits on the top mattress, okay, and he doesn't even touch the other 9 mattresses. The halacha is that all 10 of those mattresses are going to be tamei. Okay, it's a special tuma that we have called tuma mishkav umoshav. That if he sits on the top, it's like think of like the Princess and the Pea. I'm saying like she's sleeping on the top mattress and there's a little pea that's on the bottom and she doesn't realize and she says that she felt it. So this zav, if he sits on a top mattress, even though he didn't touch the other ones at all, they're going to have abba tuma that they're able to convey tuma to something else. So it's a very powerful tuma.
Time does work the other way. And what I mean is, if you have mattress on the bottom, and then the others are sort of this way, and he sits here.
No, I don't think it goes. I think it goes from the top down. It doesn't go from the bottom up.
So, on the one of the translations here, it says it's like a gonorrheal emission.
Yes.
So it's like a STD type
Of some sort, yeah. Again, you're the doctor, so you could.
Yeah, I don't know what else.
I'm an accountant, so I'll tell you how to pay the bills on it. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm trying to think what else can emit. That's
that's probably it. Yeah. So that's what it'll be referring
the
to.
other things, but okay.
Yeah.
They didn't even
I have a question for him.
By the way, first of all, it's very interesting because the most discussion that we've had on anything so far in a couple of weeks has been on these emissions that we're talking about. So just fascinating. Okay. So anyway, so the Gemara says, Mishkav Moshav, Usfira Shiva, and for counting 7 days, Zev is Hashav, and whether a person sees 2 or he sees 3, they're both the same, that if the Zav sits on the top mattress, he's going to be Matame all of them, whether it was 2 or 3, and also they have to count 7 days when they're done. Gemara says, "V'nani mili." How do we know that? So the answer is the Tan Rabbanan, Rav Sima Yomer, Mana Hakasuv Shtaim Ukaru Tame. That the pasuk says, it says Ishish Kiyeh Zav Bibsaro Zovo Tame. So it says the word Zav in the pasuk twice. So from the learning in the pasuk twice, we learn out that since it said it twice, so it calls him Tameh. So that teaches you that if he has 2 of these emissions, that he's going to be Tameh. And Shalosh Shakar Tameh. And then there's another pasuk afterwards, which also says it 3 times. It says the words of, and again, that's teaching us also that if you see 3 times, you're going to be Tameh also. So Gemara asks now. So I'm sorry. So Shtayim L'Tomo Shalosh Shakarbon, and from there we learn out. Rav Simai learns out that because it had to say 2 separate psukim, so the first pasuk is telling you that there's that you count 2 days, you're going to have to count 7 days, and then if you see it 3 times, if a person sees it, then he's going to have to bring a carbon at the end. So again, that's the difference between 2 and 3. Again, a carbon. So Gemara asks, "The Eimer Shtayim L'Toma V'lo L'Karbon V'Shalosh L'Karbon V'lo L'Toma." Maybe we're learning from the psukim that if a person sees 2 times, then he's going to be Tameh, but he doesn't bring a carbon. And if he sees 3 times, he's going to bring a carbon, but he's not Tameh. So Gemara asks on that, how's that possible? Amrit ad shelo rosh shalosh rosh shtayim. You can't say that because if a person sees 2, if a person sees 3, he must have seen 2. So you can't say that if he's 2, he's Tameh. If he's 3, he's not Tameh, but he brings a carbon. To get to 3, he had to pass 2. Okay, so when he passed 2, he became tummy at that point, and now he's going to bring the. So you can't say that it means that this explanation that you wouldn't be tummy for 3, but you'd only bring a carbon. So the Gemara says, "The Emer Shtayim l'Karbon v'lo l'Toma Shalosh af l'Toma." Maybe you're going to tell me that if you see 2, that you bring a carbon, but you're not tamei. And if you see 3, then you're going to be tamei and you bring a carbon also. Gemara says, "Lo sakadaitach." That's not the shot either. The Tanya, the Chipra lav hakon lifnei Hashem mizovo. It says in the word mizovo. What does it mean? From mixas zavim mevi'in carbon. That some of the zavim are going to bring a carbon, but mixas zavim ain't mevi'in carbon. And again, some don't. Again, from the word from mizovo, we're learning out that some don't. So haketzad rosh shalosh maybe rosh shalosh maybe shtayim enu maybe that if he saw 3, he does bring a carbon. If he saw 2, he does not bring a carbon. So Gemara says, "Oh, Eino Ella Ra Beis maybe Ra Beis maybe Ra Shalosh Any maybe." Maybe you're going to say that if you see 2, then you bring a carbon. If you see 3, you don't bring a carbon. It's going to answer the same thing we just said before. That doesn't make sense. Why? Because Amrit Achilor Shalosh Rosh time. That but in order to see 3, you had to have seen 2. So it can't be that you're going to say that if you did 2, then it's not. But you can't say that if it's for 3 that you do. You can't say it for 2 you don't, and for 2 you do, and for 3 you don't, because that wouldn't make any sense at all. The Gemara says, so we had 2 different ways to learn out, 2 different psukim to learn out for the zav. So the Gemara says, "V'isrich de Rav Simai, v'isrich mizovo." We needed to have Rav Simai's learning that he said before, that it says that where it says twice it said zovo, and we also need to have the pasuk where it said zovo later on. We need to, both learnings. Why? Dimid Rav Simai, because if I'd only learn out from Rav Simai, who says that there's a zav that has 2 that has 2 riyas, and a zav of 3 that we learn out, havamina kikushin. So we would have the question that we said before, where we said maybe you're going to say that 2 is going to be tameh is going to be a carbon without tama, and 3 would be tameh and a carbon. So therefore, we had to have the pasuk to tell you that no, that it doesn't work that way. Kamash from Lamizova, we learned out from Zova that it says that no, that you're going to have 2 is going to be tameh, 3 is also going to be tameh, and the difference is the carbon. V'imizova, if we just learned it out from Mizovo, le'yadana kama rios. wouldn't know how many reals we're talking about. And again, because we learned from before, so Kamash learned Rav Simai, so therefore we learned out from Rav Simai that tells us that 2 or 3, depending on which pasuk you're looking at, that you can have a type of situation where you have 2 riyos and it's 1 halacha, and you can have a type of situation where you have 3 riyos and it's going to be another type of halacha. The Gemara asks, the Gemara says, "V'hasha da'amrit mizova l'drasha." V'chiyitar hazav mizova my drasha space. So now that you learned out the zovo, you learned out the drasha that we said that he's going to be tamei and he's going to bring a carbon also, depending if it's 2 or 3. There's another pasuk later that also says mizova. What are we learning from that? Gemara says, "Hahumi ba'i le'lechetanya." We learned in a brisa, v'chiyitar hazav. It says that the zav shall become tahar. V'chashiyisok mizovo. That's talking about that after he became clean from his zovo. V'lo mizovo v'nigo, but not if he became cleaned from his tamei and from he had a nega tzara. So this guy had it all going for him. He was having these emissions, okay, these gonorrheal, am I saying that right? Gonorrheal emissions? Okay. So he was having some sort of STD that he was having these emissions. On top of that, he was a mitzora, okay, so like he hit the jackpot of all the different things you could have going wrong for you. So we're learning a halacha that says that the zav is able to start counting the 7 days to become tahar from his zaviness, even when he's still a mitzora. It could be the wrong way of saying it. Even when he's still a mitzora. So you might ask, what would it make a difference if he's still going to be tamei from being a mitzora, which we're going to get into mitzora. We're going to get into that tomorrow. What would it make a difference if he's going to become tahar? Why do you want to start counting now to become tahar from being a zav? He's still a mitzora, so he's still going to be tamei. The answer is tumas mishka v'moshav, because a mitzora, if he sits on the top, on the top of a bunch of, I said mattresses, but Rashi said it's like rags, so which is more common. So let's say if he's sitting on the top mattress and he's a mitzora, the rest of the mattresses, none of the mattresses are going to be tamei from that. But if he's still a zav, then it is going to be tamei. The Gemara says, so we learn out from there, v'lo mizova v'nigo. That mizova v'safar, that what does it teach us? Limit al zav bal shtei re'iyos shaton sfira shiva, that it needs to count 7 days. Okay, we're going to stop here because the Gemara is going to ask, just to set it up for tomorrow, because the Gemara is going to ask a question from Nida to show that